From Wilmette Institute, welcome to Changing Course Podcast.
Welcome to the Wilmette Institute podcast series. I'm your host, Emily Chou. In each episode, we explore vital issues with profound implications for humanity, such as race unity, education, environmental stewardship, and social change. Through thoughtful conversation, we're joined by scholars, practitioners, and change makers who help us connect ideas to meaningful action. Wilmette Institute is an online learning community grounded in an evolving Baha'i framework for collective learning. Through our accredited certificate program, we invite learners to advance their academic and professional paths while exploring current discourses in social transformation within their fields of study. Through dynamic consultation with peers and faculty and engagement in real-world grassroots efforts, participants develop the capacity to become skilled protagonists in their careers and communities. So thank you for being part of this learning journey. Let's begin. Our guest today is Bob Blecher. Bob, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. That's cool. My name, of course, is Bob, and I live in the Chicago area. I've lived here for most of my life. I feel that looking back on my life is like it's been sort of a journey to get me to this place where I'm explicitly attempting to understand and put into practice principles of social change. I actually started by studying history, which I think was my attempt to understand the world, which seemed not very understandable. And then I studied law. And I think that I was drawn to that because I had this strong sense of, say, social justice. And I practiced law for almost 20 years before I moved into education, where I have coached sports, specifically soccer, and I worked for over 20 years in the public education system. Before now, really sort of devoting myself full time to exploring alternative ways of understanding education and building community. So I think all that's led me here.
Wow, that's really beautiful to hear all the different areas you've been involved in and how it's kind of affected your path. So today our topic is going to be about humanity's movement towards its collective maturity. And we talk in the courses about how humanity has continued to evolve from different stages throughout the course of history. So just like a child grows from infancy to adulthood, humanity has also been progressing. And now we're kind of at the stage that would equate to adolescence, where we're, trying to move past thoughts or attitudes or habits from humanity's earlier stages and trying to implement new patterns of thought and action that reflect our approaching maturity and moving towards like the unification of mankind. So these new processes are gradually taking root, like you're saying, like moving towards this social change that we're trying to contribute to in whatever ways. So as we explore this topic, I would love to hear if you have maybe a story or any reflections that you'd like to share about this concept.
Well, I don't really have a story. I would like to say that that when I reflected on this concept of the movement of humanity towards its maturity, is I couldn't help but think about how I, as an individual, have sort of become a part of that movement, and that I myself am moving toward my own maturity in ways. And I would have to say that the Wilmette Institute has really been a valuable, like, stepping stone in, I think, my own personal, like, progress towards my own maturity, whatever that is, coming to look like. And when I really reflected on it, I really felt that I could really see this in two ways. And in one way is that largely through the work I've done with the Wilmette Institute social transformation program, is it's really helped me to enlarge sort of like my worldview. It's like helped me to sort of enlarge the framework through which I sort of understand and see reality in really meaningful ways. And I think that's a movement toward maturity in the sense that, when you're very young, it's like you're in the home or you're in your room, and your sense of reality and your experience is very small. But as you get older, become exposed to the wider world. And I feel that the educational process that is part of the pedagogy of the Wilmette Institute has really helped me to further enlarge my own sort of sense of what is reality. And I think that it's challenged a lot of the ways I think or have thought about reality, say, in earlier periods of my life. It's helped me to gain new perspectives when I'm trying to understand certain concepts, like concepts of maturity. How do we understand maturity itself, that concept? Um, and then I think it's also exposed me to different discourses relating to different aspects of social change and social progress, beyond, say, modern liberal ideas to really exploring perspectives that might have been more marginalized through history, the perspectives of the indigenous peoples, the experiences of the African American community in North America, those who are like invisible, like those of the lower classes. And I think that that's been really helpful in enlarging my understanding of reality. I've also been really appreciative of the examples. Like we would study examples of social change at the grassroots level, things which might not be in the mainstream media, at least not yet, but they're really valuable, I think, models that help us to mature. And I find them some really inspirational in the sense when we see people at the grassroots who are able to do these things, whether they're from indigenous communities or they're in African American communities or in their poor areas, either rural or urban areas, is that I find it extremely inspirational. And I think it's a real motivation to act. So on the one sense, I think it's enlarged my life, and I think that's a maturity. It's also done one other thing for me, and when I reflected on it, and I think that it's also sharpened my understanding of certain things related to social change. Like I feel that in order to really take action, we have to have a certain level of clarity about sort of like where are we moving toward? Like what is the vision? What gives this a direction? It's one thing to say, well, we want to change the world, but it's another thing to say, what direction do I step and toward exactly what change? And I think the courses in this program were really helpful. I think I have to say for that. It also, I think, provided me with more clarity, not just on the vision, but also it provided clarity on the methods of social change. How do we approach it? How do we actually go about moving in that direction? And it also gave me more clarity in terms of being better able to understand the reality we're living in. It's almost like we can't know what our next step is in making progress, whether it's in our own lives or whether it's in the life of society, unless and until we really have a clear enough sense of where we are. And I believe that I really gained enough clarity that I felt more and more comfortable sort of stepping into the realms of social discourse and action as well. And so this was I think, a real spur for my own personal development.
Mm. Wow, that's so beautiful and so many aspects of your life that you're talking about. I think the idea of really being able to understand what is happening in reality right now allows us to actually take those steps like you're mentioning. And I'm curious then, so you said you feel like maybe you have a sharper understanding of these kinds of steps that you might take as you like learn more.
Mhm.
So what are maybe some of those like practical things that you've done since taking the courses that maybe how you're contributing to discourse more concretely or um, in any ways that you would like to share of how are you doing that now?
Well, during the courses themselves, the program are very strongly rooted in practical application.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about learning how to engage in the discourse of society. It's really about engaging in the discourses of society. And I think it's that involvement in the discourses which really accelerates, like it certainly accelerated my progress, but my experiences is it also worked in the same way for others. I mean, we learn the most by doing. And
Mhm.
so it just makes a lot of sense. So on a couple of different levels, I've been involved in discourses related to education and then also discourses related to social action, particularly different aspects of community building. Um, since my involvement in the social transformation certificate program at the
Mm.
Wilmette Institute. So, for example, besides my work with the Wilmette Institute in education, I've been involved with consulting with the leadership of a international peace organization called the Euphrates Institute that has been in existence for over 50 or 60 years. And they're really trying to move from, say, a skill or competency-based model of social action to one which involves more and more the building of underlying capacities that exist within us. And so I've been in consultation with them, and it's really a wonderful experience. They're actually affiliated with the United Nations and they're a University of Peace in Costa Rica. So it's been really fascinating. I've also I've been involved with an organization helping to facilitate discussions across North America. The organization is called Weave, and it's under the umbrella of the Aspen Institute. And this organization is essentially it's an attempt to take people who care about building community and the different aspects of that in order to come together and sort of be able to consult in ways that are really constructive for their progress. So I help to facilitate monthly meetings for their education topic group. And then there's another organization, it's called Breaking the Paradigm.
Mm.
And this organization is really mostly most of the people who run it are trained in Montessori methods of education, which I've learned a lot about. But basically, what they're saying is what we need to do is create the foundations, the conceptual foundations for an entirely new system of education so that students could develop the capacities to engage in the transformation of society. And that's something I've been involved in. In fact, an article I wrote for their journal that was recently published on how do we reframe education, the education of adolescence, period. So there's so many opportunities that exist, and I think that the maturing that I did on a personal level, largely through the work in the Wilmette Institute, has helped me to engage in a variety of different aspects of the discourses that exist in society. Also, there was in the area of social action, there was an organization that I actually worked with as part of a project I did for one of the courses that I took in the Wilmette Institute program for social transformation. And that was a local organization called Peacebrook. And they were trying to pull people together to build communities. And I've remained involved in that organization since the course, and it's been now several years. And partly because of my involvement in this, is we've taken some opportunities to expand and the work of our community to the point where we now encompass 7 different organizations that are all working together. At the time I started with this, it was just Peacebrook, but now literally 7 different organizations are involved, including faith organizations that are Christian, faith organizations that are Baha'i, and faith organizations that are Muslim, as well as two secular social action organizations that work on the west side of Chicago, which is actually a very impoverished area. So it's just been wonderful,
Mm.
really, to sort of be engaged in this learning and have enough clarity that I feel that I can actually contribute in a positive way to this process.
Wow. Wow, I had no idea you were involved in so many different endeavors, and it's so nice to see because like within the courses, you go out and you talk and you have conversations and practice this discourse with maybe an
Hmm.
organization or individuals, and it's so nice to hear that, even if you took the course 3 years ago, that you're still continuing those conversations with all these organizations, and then that learning helps you to contribute in other ways. So it's really nice to see how um, maybe a few little steps can then make your all your other actions a lot more clear and meaningful also. And just it sounds like doors are opening and you're able to meet new organizations and continue to contribute in nice ways. I'm curious if you would like to share anything else in particular that relates to um, humanity's movement towards its maturity, or if how maybe the courses have also like helped you contribute to this discourse. Um, any of any thoughts? I'm open to hearing your thoughts. I'm sure you have
Yeah.
lots to share.
If I had to think of one thing that I'm finding is extremely important, and I think the Wilmette Institute has really been helpful for me in sort of helping me to gain this clarity and allowing me to make it sort of center it in my life, is
Mm,
one of the things that I've I've learned is that so much of what is progress toward maturity involves making the acquisition, right, of new knowledge like central in our lives. And I find this to be a really powerful idea and one which I think is consistent with ideas of justice that need to, that in the modern world, as we are living in a world that is more and more divided, and we see the institutions of society sort of disintegrating before our own eyes. And within that context, I think justice sort of looks like the participation of more and more people
mhm,
in a process of generating new knowledge. And the reason for that, at least to the best of my current understanding, is that it's only when we're able to generate new knowledge that we're able to make progress in our lives.
mm,
If I'm not actively involved in a process, even sort of a culture of learning,
mhm,
where I'm an active participant in the generation of new knowledge, then I think that we're sort of stuck with working with the knowledge we have. And so
mhm,
all we could do is do the same things we've already done. And all we can perpetuate are the same patterns that we've inherited. But
mm,
real progress depends on us being able to create new patterns
mhm,
of behavior and create new patterns of relationships and create new patterns upon which, new institutions can be created. And that's when we're going to see the kind of transformation that really society really needs today. And I think a lot of individuals on a personal level also need it. So I would say that if there was something that really centers all this work, is that all of it is based upon my own understanding of how central the generation of new knowledge is to my own progress toward maturity
mhm,
and to society's progress toward maturity as well. And
mhm,
one last thing I'll say about it is that for me, is that this is something that allows me to continue to grow. And when I
mhm,
say that, I think to myself, it's like, as long as I'm continuing to grow, is that I'm actually alive and healthy. And the moment I stop that process, right, I'm not as healthy and I'm
Mhm.
engaging in a process of disintegration myself. And so for me, I have to say that on so many levels, it's extremely valuable as a source of real meaning in my own
Mhm.
life.
Wow. That's such a beautiful insight of how we have to continue to generate knowledge and be able to only when we're doing that and all groups, like you mentioned, there's so many groups of people. Maybe we think like academia is the way that people are generating knowledge, but if the more justice we have in the world, everyone is contributors of that knowledge, and that's how we're actually going to progress towards this maturity we're trying to. Um, so before we go, I wanted to ask one more question. Do you feel like there are any actionable steps that listeners can take from what you've learned?
Well, I don't know. I really feel like it's really the actionable steps that have been the most valuable for me have been those steps which helped me to expand and sharpen my own consciousness, right? My own knowledge,
Hmm.
because it's the new knowledge that allows me to take action that could be more and more effective.
Mm,
And so when I think to myself, is like what really helps to sort of have helped in my life to kickstart that process, allow it to move forward, provide me with support. I would honestly say that I can't think of a better way of doing that than to really engage in the programs
mm,
that the Wilmette Institute is developing. I don't know of any other formal educational process that exists at this point that is really sort of tackle this idea of generating, applying and disseminating new knowledge in real time that can apply to very real processes of social transformation.
mm,
So all I could say is that I benefited tremendously. I can't say how much I have from participating in these programs, and I think it's a logical place for people to start
mhm.
if they really feel like, oh, I really want to help, but I don't know what to do or how to do it. I can't think of a better place to start.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. And I think just like you're saying, to help us move forward, we have to acquire new knowledge. And I think the courses really do help us understand what is happening in reality at a broader level. And then also there's so much accompaniment to help us like try to take a few steps, and then we're supported and we're, able to reflect with others and think about our steps that we take. And I think that structure really does help us to figure out what our steps are and how we can contribute to social change. So I really appreciate all your time and hearing about all of your thoughts about your own advancement towards maturity and how that also correlates with humanity's movement towards its collective maturity. And thank you so much for sharing. We'll see everyone on the next one.
Thank you for having me, Emily. I appreciate it.
Stay inspired. Until next time.